The morning sun cast long shadows across Fort Mitchell's training grounds as Sergeant Marcus Riley adjusted his combat gear one final time. The air was thick with anticipation and the familiar smell of dust and sweat that always accompanied field exercises. Today was different, though. Today, the 3rd Infantry Division was conducting their most intensive combat simulation of the year, and everyone knew careers could be made or broken based on performance. Marcus had been in the Army for 8 years, working his way up from a green recruit to a respected non-commissioned officer. His record was spotless, his leadership skills recognized by superiors, and his men trusted him completely. At 29, he had his sights set on making staff sergeant within the next promotion cycle. This exercise was his chance to prove he deserved it. The training scenario was complex, a simulated urban warfare situation where 2 companies would face off in a mock city built specifically for such exercises. Buildings made of plywood and concrete blocks created realistic street layouts, complete with windows, doorways, and rooftops that provided strategic advantage points. The objective was simple in theory, but challenging in execution: capture and hold key positions while eliminating enemy forces. Marcus gathered his squad of 12 soldiers around him as other units prepared nearby. The sounds of equipment being checked, radios crackling with communications, and boots on gravel filled the air. His squad was tight-knit, having trained together for months. There was Jenkins, the veteran marksman who could hit a target from incredible distances; Rodriguez, the communications specialist who never let them down; and Thompson, the explosives expert who could breach any barrier. As Marcus briefed his team on their assigned sector, he noticed movement in his peripheral vision. A figure in combat fatigues was walking purposefully across the compound, heading toward the command post. Something about the person's stride and posture caught his attention, but before he could focus on it properly, his radio crackled to life. "All units, this is Control. Exercise begins in 15 minutes. Repeat, 15 minutes to commencement. Ensure all safety protocols are in place, and weapons are loaded with simulation rounds only." The announcement snapped Marcus back to the task at hand. He ran through the final equipment check with his squad, ensuring everyone had their protective gear properly secured and their weapons loaded with a special training ammunition designed to mark hits without causing serious injury. The simulation rounds were high-tech devices that would register impacts and send signals to a central computer system that tracked the exercise in real time. "Listen up," Marcus called to his squad. "We've trained for this scenario dozens of times. Stick to the plan, watch each other's backs, and remember your training. Alpha team takes the left flank, Bravo team goes right, and Charlie team holds the center. I'll coordinate from a command position once we establish our foothold." The soldiers nodded, their faces showing the mix of excitement and nervous energy that always preceded major exercises. This wasn't their first rodeo, but the stakes felt higher somehow. Word had come down from battalion headquarters that several high-ranking officers would be observing, evaluating unit readiness and individual performance for upcoming deployment rotations. As the countdown continued, Marcus checked his own gear one more time. His rifle was clean and properly zeroed, his radio was functioning perfectly, and his body armor was secure. He had done this routine hundreds of times, but he never took shortcuts when it came to safety and preparation. In the Army, attention to detail wasn't just about following regulations. It was about staying alive and keeping your people safe. The mock city stretched out before them, a maze of buildings and obstacles that would test every skill they had learned in training. Marcus studied the layout one final time, visualizing the routes his teams would take and identifying potential choke points and ambush sites. The enemy force, comprised of soldiers from another company, would be equally well prepared and motivated. This wasn't going to be easy. 5 minutes to commencement, came the voice over the radio. Marcus felt his heart rate increase slightly, a natural response to impending action that he had learned to channel into focus and alertness. Around him, his squad members were making their own final preparations, checking weapons, adjusting equipment, and reviewing their assigned routes one last time. The observation tower stood tall above the training area, and Marcus could see figures moving around up there. Officers with binoculars and notepads evaluating every move that would be made in the coming hours. He knew that careers could be advanced or stalled based on performance in exercises like this, and he was determined to lead his squad to success. 2 minutes, announced the radio. Marcus gathered his squad leaders for a final word. Remember, this is about teamwork and communication. Individual heroics might look impressive, but they usually get people killed in real combat. We move together, we watch out for each other, and we accomplish the mission as a unit. The 3 team leaders nodded their understanding. Jenkins, Rodriguez, and Thompson had all been with Marcus for over a year, and they had developed an almost telepathic understanding of each other's methods and capabilities. This cohesion would be their greatest asset in the complex urban environment they were about to enter. 30 seconds to commencement. All units prepare to execute. Marcus keyed his radio. Alpha Squad ready for action. Similar confirmations came from the other squad leaders across both companies. The tension was palpable as over 60 soldiers prepared to engage in what would be several hours of intense, simulated combat. Exercise commences now. All units are cleared hot. The words had barely finished crackling through the radio when Marcus gave the hand signal to his teams. Like a well-oiled machine, his squad moved forward in practice formations, each team taking their assigned route toward their objectives in the mock city. The game was on, and Marcus felt the familiar rush of adrenaline that came with leading soldiers into action, even simulated action. Little did he know that this exercise would become the most significant event of his military career, setting in motion a chain of events that would test not just his tactical skills, but his character, his loyalty, and ultimately his future in the Army. He had dedicated his life to serving. The first phase of the exercise unfolded exactly as Marcus had hoped. His squad moved through the mock city with precision and coordination, securing their initial objectives without taking any simulated casualties. The urban environment was challenging, with multiple levels of engagement and countless hiding spots where enemy forces could set up ambushes. But Marcus's careful planning and his team's excellent training showed immediate results. 20 minutes into the exercise, Alpha Squad had successfully captured and fortified 2 key buildings in their assigned sector. Jenkins had established an excellent overwatch position on a rooftop that gave him clear sight lines across several streets, while Rodriguez maintained constant communication with both the other team leaders and the exercise controllers. Thompson had already used his expertise to breach 2 simulated barriers, opening up crucial movement routes for follow-on forces. Control, this is Alpha Squad Leader, Marcus reported into his radio. Phase 1 objective secured. No casualties. Requesting permission to advance to Phase 2. Alpha Squad Leader, this is Control. Well done. You are cleared to advance. Be advised, enemy forces are massing for counterattack in your sector. Marcus smiled grimly. The opposition was clearly taking their units seriously, which meant the real test was about to begin. He signaled to his team leaders, and within minutes they had reorganized for the next phase of their mission. As his squad moved deeper into the mock city, Marcus caught sight of movement in a building complex about 50 meters ahead. Through his binoculars, he could see enemy soldiers taking positions behind windows and doorways, clearly preparing for an ambush. This was exactly the kind of tactical situation that separated good soldiers from great ones. Alpha teams, this is Leader. Enemy positions identified in Building 7. Jenkins, can you get a clear shot on the upper windows? Negative, Leader. Too much cover for my current position. I need to relocate. Rodriguez, what's our communication status with adjacent units? All clear, Leader. Bravo Company is approximately 100 meters to our north. Charlie Company is holding position as planned. Marcus studied the tactical situation carefully. The enemy had chosen their position well, with multiple exit routes and overlapping fields of fire. A direct assault would likely result in heavy casualties for his squad, even in simulation. This called for a more creative approach. Thompson, can you create a diversion on the east side of that building? Something loud enough to draw their attention. Absolutely, leader. Give me 2 minutes to get in position. While Thompson maneuvered to create his distraction, Marcus repositioned Jenkins to a better vantage point and prepared Rodriguez's team for a coordinated assault from an unexpected direction. The beauty of working with experienced soldiers was that complex maneuvers could be executed with minimal communication, reducing the risk of intercepted radio traffic giving away their plans. The diversion worked perfectly. When Thompson's simulated explosive went off on the eastern side of Building 7, the enemy soldiers naturally shifted their attention and repositioning to meet what appeared to be the main threat. This gave Jenkins the clear shots he needed and allowed Rodriguez's team to approach from the virtually undefended western side. The simulated firefight that followed was intense and realistic. The training ammunition created realistic sound effects and visual markers when hits were scored, while sensors on each soldier's equipment registered impacts and transmitted data to the exercise controllers. Within 10 minutes, Marcus's squad had successfully cleared Building 7 and captured 6 enemy soldiers. Outstanding work, came the voice over the radio from the exercise control team. Alpha Squad, you are cleared to continue to Phase 3 objectives. As they prepared to move deeper into enemy territory, Marcus noticed something that would later prove significant. Among the captured enemy soldiers was a female sergeant he didn't recognize. She was wearing standard combat fatigues, but something about her equipment and bearing seemed different from the typical infantry soldiers his unit usually trained against. The woman was tall and athletic, probably in her mid-20s, with short brown hair barely visible beneath her combat helmet. What caught Marcus's attention most was her confident demeanor despite being captured in the exercise. Most soldiers showed at least some frustration or disappointment when eliminated from war games, but she seemed almost amused by the situation. Nice tactical work, Sergeant, she said to Marcus as his soldiers secured the building. Your diversionary tactic was textbook perfect. Marcus nodded politely. Thank you. Haven't seen you around the base before. Are you new to the brigade? Something like that. She replied with a slight smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. I am Sergeant Sara Michel. I'm here for special evaluation purposes. Before Marcus could ask what kind of special evaluation, his radio crackled with urgent traffic. All units. Be advised we have unscheduled helicopter traffic inbound to the training area. Maintain current positions until aircraft has cleared the airspace. Marcus looked up to see a military helicopter approaching from the south, flying low and fast toward the command post area. This was unusual because all air traffic was normally coordinated well in advance of major training exercises to avoid conflicts and safety issues. That's strange, Rodriguez commented, watching the aircraft through his binoculars. That's not one of our standard transport birds. The helicopter circled the training area once before landing near the command post, about 300 meters from Marcus's current position. Even at that distance, he could see several figures in different uniforms climbing out of the aircraft. They moved with purpose toward the command post, clearly on some kind of official business. Control, this is Alpha Squad Leader. What's the status on resuming the exercise? Alpha Squad Leader, stand by. We're getting updated instructions from higher headquarters. Marcus frowned. In 8 years of military service, he had rarely seen exercises interrupted unless there was a genuine emergency or safety concern. The helicopter arrival seemed too coincidental to be unrelated to the training suspension. Sergeant Mitchell, who was still technically a captured enemy soldier in the exercise, seemed unusually interested in the helicopter activity. Marcus noticed her studying the aircraft and the figures around the command post with intense concentration. Interesting timing, she murmured, more to herself than to anyone else. What did you say? Marcus asked. Oh, nothing important. Just wondering if this delay will affect the exercise timeline. Something in her tone made Marcus look at her more carefully. There was something about Sergeant Mitchell that didn't quite fit the normal pattern of soldiers participating in training exercises. Her equipment was standard military issue, but it looked newer and better maintained than typical. Her uniform bore the appropriate rank insignia and unit patches, but Marcus couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. All units, this is control. Exercise is temporarily suspended. Maintain current positions and await further instructions. The announcement triggered a wave of confused radio chatter across the training area. Soldiers began speculating about what could cause such an unusual suspension, with theories ranging from equipment malfunctions to visiting VIPs requiring security modifications. Marcus gathered his squad in a defensive position within Building 7 and settled in to wait for further instructions. He had learned long ago that the military operated on its own timeline, and that patience was often the most important virtue a soldier could possess. As they waited, he found himself continuing to observe Sergeant Mitchell. She had positioned herself where she could watch both the command post and the surrounding training area, and Marcus noticed that she seemed more interested in observing his squad's actions and reactions than in participating in the typical soldier banter that usually filled such delays. 20 minutes passed before the radio crackled back to life with new instructions that would change everything. All units, this is control. Exercise parameters have been modified. New objectives are being uploaded to squad leaders now. Be advised that evaluation criteria have been updated and additional observers are now active in the training area. Marcus checked his tactical computer and found the new mission parameters waiting for download. As he studied the updated objectives, he realized that the exercise had suddenly become much more complex and demanding than originally planned. The new scenario included additional enemy forces, modified rules of engagement, and objectives that would push his squad to their absolute limits. What Marcus didn't know was that the helicopter had delivered a team of Criminal Investigation Division agents to the base, and that Sergeant Mitchell was not just another soldier participating in the training exercise. The real test was just beginning, and it had nothing to do with tactical proficiency or military skills. When the exercise resumed with its modified parameters, Marcus immediately noticed the increased intensity. The new objectives required his squad to assault and hold a fortified position that would normally require at least platoon-strength forces. It was clearly designed to test their limits and see how they performed under extreme pressure. This is going to be challenging, Thompson observed as they studied the updated tactical situation. They want us to take that entire compound with just our 12-person squad. Marcus nodded grimly. The target was a complex of interconnected buildings surrounded by defensive barriers and multiple choke points. Intelligence reports indicated it was defended by at least 20 enemy soldiers with machine gun positions and possible mortar support. We'll have to be creative, Marcus replied. Standard frontal assault tactics won't work here. We need to think outside the box. As they prepared for the assault, Marcus noticed that Sergeant Mitchell had been reassigned to accompany his squad as an attached specialist. This struck him as odd because mid-exercise personnel changes were extremely rare, but the orders came directly from the exercise control team. What's your specialty? Marcus asked Mitchell as they prepared to move out. Intelligence analysis and surveillance, she replied smoothly. I'm here to observe and provide tactical recommendations based on enemy movement patterns. Something about her answer felt rehearsed, but Marcus didn't have time to pursue the matter. His squad was about to undertake their most challenging mission of the day, and every detail of their performance would be under intense scrutiny. The approach to the target compound required careful coordination. Marcus split his squad into 3 teams, each with a specific role in the complex assault plan he had developed. The terrain offered limited cover, so timing would be absolutely critical. Remember, Marcus briefed his teams. This isn't about individual glory. We succeed or fail together. Watch your spacing, maintain communication, and adapt to changing conditions. The assault began exactly at 1,430 hours. Jenkins, and his Overwatch team established positions on high ground approximately 200 meters from the target, providing covering fire and battlefield intelligence. Thompson's breach team moved toward the eastern wall of the compound, carrying the specialized equipment needed to create entry points through the defensive barriers. Rodriguez led the main assault element in a sweeping maneuver designed to draw enemy attention while Thompson's team worked. The plan was complex but well-rehearsed, relying on precise timing and flawless execution. For the first 10 minutes, everything went according to plan. Thompson successfully breached the eastern barrier, while Rodriguez's team engaged the enemy defenders in a fierce simulated firefight. Jenkins provided excellent overwatch, eliminating several enemy soldiers who attempted to reposition against the assault teams. Then, something went wrong. During the heat of the simulated battle, as Marcus moved with Rodriguez's team through the breach Thompson had created, he found himself in close combat with an enemy soldier who had been hiding in a concealed position. The engagement was intense and realistic, with both soldiers using their training in hand-to-hand combat techniques. In the confusion and adrenaline of the moment, Marcus grabbed the enemy soldier to prevent him from bringing his weapon to bear. As they struggled, his hand caught the soldier's equipment patch and tore it partially away from the uniform. What Marcus saw beneath the torn patch made his blood run cold. Instead of the standard unit identification expected on an opposing force soldier, there was a small electronic device about the size of a coin. It was clearly some kind of recording or monitoring equipment, completely unauthorized for training exercises. "What the hell is this?" Marcus demanded, holding up the torn patch and the exposed device. The enemy soldier, a young private named Davidson, looked genuinely confused. "I don't know, Sergeant. That's not supposed to be there. Someone must have put it on my gear without telling me." Marcus felt a chill of realization wash over him. Someone had been conducting unauthorized surveillance during the exercise, recording or monitoring activities that should have been limited to official exercise controllers. This was a serious violation of military regulations and potentially a criminal offense. "Davidson, who had access to your equipment this morning?" Marcus asked urgently. "Just the normal pre-exercise inspection, Sergeant." Sergeant Mitchell checked everyone's gear before we deployed. Marcus's mind raced as the implications became clear. Sergeant Mitchell, who was supposedly attached to his squad as an intelligence specialist, had been secretly placing surveillance devices on other soldiers' equipment. But why? And under whose authority? Before Marcus could process this information fully, his radio erupted with urgent traffic. All units, all units. Exercise terminated immediately. All personnel returned to designated assembly areas for debriefing. This is not a drill. Exercise terminated. The sudden termination sent waves of confusion through the training area. Soldiers began emerging from defensive positions and moving toward the assembly areas, chattering about what could have caused such an abrupt end to what had been progressing as a successful exercise. Marcus looked around for Sergeant Mitchell, but couldn't see her anywhere. In the confusion of the exercise termination, she had simply vanished. This raised even more red flags in his mind. "Rodriguez, have you seen Sergeant Mitchell?" Marcus called to his communications specialist. "Negative, leader. Last I saw her was about 15 minutes ago, near the command post." Marcus made a decision that would prove crucial in the coming hours. Instead of immediately reporting to the assembly area as ordered, he carefully secured the torn patch and its hidden device in a sealed equipment bag. His military training had taught him to preserve evidence when something suspicious occurred. As his squad moved toward the assembly area, Marcus noticed unusual activity around the command post. Several individuals in civilian clothes were moving purposefully between various stations, and there seemed to be an unusual number of senior officers present for what should have been a routine training exercise. "Something's not right here," Thompson observed quietly as they walked. "This whole thing feels off." Marcus nodded, but kept his concerns to himself for the moment. Military protocol required him to follow the chain of command, but he was beginning to suspect that normal protocol might not apply to whatever was actually happening. The assembly area was buzzing with confused soldiers trying to understand why their exercise had been terminated so abruptly. Squad leaders from other units were comparing notes, trying to piece together what had gone wrong. Did anyone else notice anything unusual during the exercise? Marcus asked some of the other squad leaders. Now that you mention it, replied Staff Sergeant Williams from Bravo Company, we had a sergeant attached to our unit who seemed more interested in watching us than participating in the exercise. Said she was from intelligence. Same here, added Sergeant First Class Johnson from Charlie Company. Sergeant somebody. Mitchell, I think. Never seen her before, but she had all the right paperwork. Marcus felt his suspicions crystallizing into certainty. Sergeant Mitchell had been systematically inserted into multiple units during the exercise, conducting some kind of covert surveillance operation. The question was whether this was an authorized investigation or something more sinister. As the debriefing process began, Marcus made another crucial decision. He decided to keep the evidence he had discovered secure until he could determine who could be trusted with the information. In his 8 years of military service, he had learned that jumping to conclusions or acting precipitously could destroy careers and relationships. But he was about to discover that in some situations, hesitation could be far more dangerous than decisive action. The debriefing officer, a major Marcus had never seen before, began asking detailed questions about specific events during the exercise. The questions seemed unusually focused on soldier interactions and equipment status, rather than the tactical performance normally emphasized in training evaluations. When the major's questions turned to any unusual observations or incidents during the exercise, Marcus faced his first real test. Should he report what he had discovered immediately, or should he investigate further before making accusations that could have serious consequences for everyone involved? His decision would set in motion events that none of them could have anticipated. Marcus chose to keep the evidence secure while he gathered more information. During the debriefing, he provided accurate accounts of his squad's tactical performance while carefully avoiding mention of the surveillance device he had discovered. Something about the major's line of questioning made him cautious about revealing what he knew until he better understood the situation. Sergeant Riley, the major said, consulting his notes, your squad performed exceptionally well during the modified exercise parameters. Were there any equipment malfunctions or unusual incidents that affected your unit's performance? No, sir, Marcus replied carefully. All equipment functioned normally, and we achieved our assigned objectives within the specified timeline. The major nodded and moved on to other questions, but Marcus noticed that several of the civilian-clothed individuals present were taking detailed notes during his responses. This was highly unusual for a training exercise debriefing. After the formal debriefing concluded, Marcus gathered his squad for their own internal after-action review. This was standard procedure, allowing the team to discuss lessons learned and areas for improvement without outside observers. Something strange happened during that exercise. Marcus told his team once they were alone in their assigned briefing room. I need everyone to think carefully about any unusual interactions or observations you made today. Jenkins was the first to speak up. That Sergeant Mitchell, who was attached to us, seemed more interested in watching our procedures than participating in the mission. She kept asking questions about our equipment and communication protocols. Same observation here, Rodriguez added. She wanted to know specific details about our radio frequencies and encryption methods. Seemed like an odd focus for someone who was supposed to be providing intelligence support. Thompson nodded in agreement. When I was setting up the breach charges, she asked very detailed questions about our demolition procedures and safety protocols. More detailed than most officers would ask. Marcus felt his concerns deepening. The pattern emerging suggested that Sergeant Mitchell had been conducting systematic intelligence gathering on his squad's capabilities, procedures, and equipment. But for what purpose? I need everyone to maintain operational security about today's events, Marcus instructed his team. Don't discuss details with soldiers from other units until we understand what's really going on here. After dismissing his squad, Marcus decided to conduct some discreet investigation on his own. He made his way to the base administrative offices to see what information he could gather about Sergeant Mitchell's assignment and background. The personnel office was busy with normal end-of-day activities, but Marcus knew the sergeant on duty and was able to make some informal inquiries. "Hey, Sarah," he said to Sergeant Phillips, who managed personnel records. "I'm trying to track down some information about a soldier who was attached to my unit today." "Sergeant Mitchell, first name Sarah. Do you have any records on her assignment orders?" Sergeant Phillips pulled up her computer system and searched for several minutes before frowning. "That's strange, Marcus. I don't see any assignment orders for a Sergeant Sarah Mitchell to participate in today's exercise. Are you sure you have a name right?" "Positive," Marcus replied, his concern growing. "She was definitely with us during the training, and she had proper identification and equipment." "Let me check the temporary duty rosters and special assignment lists," Phillips offered, typing rapidly on her keyboard. After several more minutes of searching, she looked up with a troubled expression. "Marcus, there's no record anywhere in our system of Sergeant Sarah Mitchell. No temporary duty orders, no special assignments, no training participation authorizations. According to our records, no one by that name should have been involved in today's exercise." Marcus felt a cold knot forming in his stomach. If Sergeant Mitchell wasn't officially assigned to participate in the exercise, then her presence represented a serious security breach. Combined with the surveillance devices he had discovered, this suggested something far more serious than unauthorized observation. "Sarah, I need you to keep this inquiry confidential for now," Marcus said carefully. "There may be security implications I need to investigate further." "Of course," Phillips replied. "But, Marcus, if there's been a security breach, shouldn't we report this immediately?" "I'm going to handle it through appropriate channels," Marcus assured her, though he wasn't entirely sure what those appropriate channels might be in a situation like this. Leaving the personnel office, Marcus realized he was facing a dilemma that went far beyond normal military protocol. If Sergeant Mitchell was operating without proper authorization, she could be anything from an investigator conducting a legitimate but covert inquiry to a foreign agent gathering intelligence on American military capabilities. Marcus decided his next step should be to examine the surveillance device more carefully. He returned to his quarters and retrieved the sealed evidence bag containing the torn patch and its hidden electronic component. Under better lighting and with more time to examine it closely, Marcus could see that the device was sophisticated and expensive. It appeared to be some kind of miniaturized recording and transmission equipment, far more advanced than anything typically available to individual soldiers. The discovery confirmed his worst fears. Someone had been conducting systematic electronic surveillance of the training exercise, recording conversations, tactics, and procedures that should have remained classified within military channels. As Marcus contemplated his next move, his room phone rang. The caller identification showed it was coming from the base commander's office. "Sergeant Riley, this is Colonel Patterson's office. The colonel wants to see you immediately in his office. Please report as soon as possible." Marcus felt his heart rate increase. A direct summons from the base commander was highly unusual, especially after normal duty hours. It could be related to his performance during the exercise, or it could mean that someone knew about his investigation into the surveillance activities. As he prepared to report to Colonel Patterson's office, Marcus made a crucial decision. He secured the evidence in a safe location known only to himself and prepared a sealed letter explaining his discoveries. If something happened to him during the meeting with the colonel, at least there would be a record of what he had found. The walk to the base commander's office seemed longer than usual. Marcus's mind raced through possible scenarios, from commendation for his squad's excellent performance to interrogation about potential security violations. When he arrived at the commander's office, Marcus was surprised to find not just Colonel Patterson waiting for him, but also the major who had conducted the debriefing and two of the civilian-clothed individuals he had observed earlier in the day. "Sergeant Riley, please have a seat," Colonel Patterson said, his expression unreadable. "We need to discuss some aspects of today's training exercise." As Marcus settled into the indicated chair, he noticed that one of the civilians was studying him intently. There was something about the man's bearing and attention to detail that suggested law enforcement or intelligence training. "Sergeant, we understand you may have observed some unusual activities during today's exercise," the major began. "We're hoping you can help us understand exactly what occurred." Marcus realized he was at a critical decision point. His response to this question would determine not just his own future, but potentially the outcome of whatever investigation was underway. "Sir, I'd be happy to help with any investigation," Marcus replied carefully. "Could you help me understand the nature of your inquiry, so I can provide the most useful information?" The civilian who had been studying Marcus leaned forward slightly. "Sergeant Riley, I'm Agent Johnson from the Criminal Investigation Division. We're conducting an investigation into potential security violations that may have occurred during today's exercise. We believe you may have information relevant to our inquiry." The mention of CID made everything suddenly clear to Marcus. The Criminal Investigation Division only became involved when serious crimes or security breaches were suspected. Whatever had been happening during the exercise was far more serious than unauthorized observation. "Agent Johnson, I may indeed have information relevant to your investigation," Marcus said, making his decision. "However, I'd like to understand my legal status before proceeding. Am I being questioned as a witness or as a suspect?" The agent's expression remained neutral, but Marcus caught a slight nod of what might have been approval. "At this point, Sergeant, you're being interviewed as a potential witness. However, I should advise you that depending on what information emerges, that status could change." Marcus took a deep breath. The time for caution had passed. Whatever was happening was bigger than his career or his concerns about following protocol. "In that case, Agent Johnson, I believe I have evidence that will be very relevant to your investigation." Agent Johnson's eyebrows raised slightly at Marcus's statement. "What kind of evidence, Sergeant?" Marcus straightened in his chair, knowing that his next words would irrevocably commit him to whatever course of action lay ahead. "During the exercise, I discovered what appears to be unauthorized surveillance equipment hidden on another soldier's gear. I also have concerns about the individual who claimed to be Sergeant Sarah Mitchell." The reaction in the room was immediate and intense. Agent Johnson leaned forward. Colonel Patterson's expression became grave, and the major began taking rapid notes. "Please explain exactly what you discovered and when," Agent Johnson instructed. Marcus provided a detailed account of his encounter with Private Davidson, the torn patch, the hidden surveillance device, and his subsequent investigation into Sergeant Mitchell's background. He explained his decision to preserve the evidence and his discovery that no such person was officially assigned to participate in the exercise. "Where is this evidence now?" Agent Johnson asked. "Secured in a location known only to me," Marcus replied. "I can retrieve it immediately if needed." "That will be necessary," the agent confirmed. "Colonel Patterson, we'll need to expand our investigation immediately. This confirms our worst suspicions." Colonel Patterson nodded grimly. "Agent Johnson, you have my full cooperation and that of this command. Whatever resources you need are at your disposal." Marcus found himself in the unusual position of being both relieved and apprehensive. His decision to investigate and preserve evidence had clearly been the right choice, but the gravity of the situation was becoming apparent. "Sergeant Riley," Agent Johnson continued, "what you've discovered appears to be part of a larger operation we've been investigating for several months. Your actions today may have provided the breakthrough we needed." The agent went on to explain that CID had been investigating suspected espionage activities targeting military training exercises and classified tactical procedures. Several bases had reported similar incidents involving unauthorized personnel observing exercises and unexplained equipment malfunctions during training. The individual claiming to be Sergeant Mitchell is actually Elena Kozlov, a foreign intelligence operative we've been tracking for over a year, Agent Johnson revealed. She's been systematically infiltrating military exercises to gather intelligence on American tactical capabilities and training methods. Marcus felt a chill as he realized how close his squad had come to compromising classified information. Kozlov had been positioned to observe their most sensitive procedures and communication protocols. What about the surveillance devices? Marcus asked. Part of a sophisticated intelligence gathering operation, the Major explained. The devices were designed to record conversations and transmit tactical information to external receivers. We believe similar devices were placed on soldiers throughout the exercise area. Colonel Patterson leaned back in his chair, clearly troubled by the implications. How many exercises might have been compromised? We're still investigating, Agent Johnson replied. But based on what Sergeant Riley discovered today, we may be looking at security breaches spanning multiple bases and several months of training activities. The agent turned back to Marcus. Sergeant, your quick thinking and proper handling of the evidence may have prevented a much more serious compromise of national security. However, we're going to need your continued cooperation as this investigation proceeds. Marcus nodded his understanding. Whatever you need, Agent Johnson, my squad, and I are completely at your disposal. There will be additional interviews and probably testimony in legal proceedings, the agent warned. This investigation is going to take months to complete fully. As the meeting continued, Marcus learned that the abrupt termination of the exercise had been triggered when CID agents spotted Kozlov attempting to transmit data from a concealed position near the command post. When they moved to apprehend her, she had escaped using predetermined extraction routes. Your discovery of the surveillance device confirms that she was operating as part of a larger network, Agent Johnson explained. We believe there are other operatives involved and possibly compromised personnel within our own ranks. The implications were staggering. If foreign intelligence services had been systematically penetrating American military training exercises, they could have gathered information about tactical procedures, equipment capabilities, and operational methods that took years to develop. What happens now? Marcus asked. Now we work to identify and roll up the entire network, Agent Johnson replied. Your evidence gives us the technical intelligence we need to trace their methods and identify other compromise operations. Colonel Patterson stood up, signaling that the initial briefing was concluding. Sergeant Riley, you're to be commended for your alertness and professional handling of this situation. Your actions reflect great credit upon yourself and this command. Marcus felt both pride and concern. While he was gratified that his instincts and actions had been validated, he also understood that his involvement in this investigation would likely change the course of his military career in ways he couldn't yet predict. Sir, what about my squad? They performed excellently today, and I don't want this situation to reflect negatively on their records. Your squad's performance was exemplary, Agent Johnson assured him. In fact, their professionalism and discipline may have prevented Kozlov from gathering even more sensitive information. They'll likely be commended as well. As the meeting broke up, Agent Johnson pulled Marcus aside for a private word. Sergeant, I want you to understand the significance of what you accomplished today. Military personnel often hesitate to report suspicious activities because they're concerned about making false accusations or disrupting operations. Your willingness to investigate and preserve evidence while following proper procedures may have prevented a major intelligence disaster. Marcus felt the weight of responsibility settling on his shoulders. Agent Johnson, I just did what my training taught me to do. When something doesn't look right, you investigate carefully and report through appropriate channels. That's exactly right, the agent replied. And that's why we're going to be asking for your help as this investigation continues. We need people with your instincts and integrity to help us identify and prevent future compromise operations. As Marcus left the colonel's office, his mind was spinning with the implications of everything he had learned. What had started as a routine training exercise had exposed a sophisticated foreign intelligence operation targeting the American military's most sensitive training methods. Walking back toward his quarters, Marcus thought about his squad and their excellent performance during the exercise. Despite the covert surveillance and unauthorized observation, they had accomplished their mission and demonstrated the professionalism that made the American military the most capable force in the world. The investigation that followed would indeed take months to complete, as Agent Johnson had predicted. Marcus would spend countless hours in interviews and debriefings helping CID piece together the scope and methods of the intelligence operation. His testimony would eventually contribute to the prosecution of several foreign operatives and the identification of security vulnerabilities that led to significant improvements in exercise security protocols. 6 months later, Marcus would receive the Army Commendation Medal for his actions during the exercise, with a citation specifically recognizing his alertness, initiative, and professional excellence in identifying and reporting potential security violations. The ceremony would be attended by his entire squad, all of whom had also received recognition for their performance and professionalism during the compromised exercise. But more importantly, the intelligence gathered from the surveillance devices and Marcus's investigation would lead to the disruption of a major foreign intelligence network that had been operating against American military installations for over 2 years. The operation, designated Silent Observer by CID, would become a case study in both the sophistication of modern intelligence threats and the importance of individual vigilance in maintaining national security. Marcus would go on to make Staff Sergeant ahead of schedule, with his performance during the investigation cited as evidence of his potential for greater responsibilities. His military career would continue to flourish, but he would always remember the day when a simple training exercise taught him that vigilance and integrity were just as important as tactical skills in serving his country. The torn patch that started it all would eventually be displayed in a classified exhibit at the CID headquarters, serving as a reminder to future investigators about the importance of paying attention to details that don't quite fit the expected pattern. Sometimes, Marcus would reflect, the smallest anomalies reveal the largest threats, and it's the responsibility of every professional soldier to remain alert to dangers that might not be immediately obvious. Elena Kozlov was never captured, but the intelligence operation she represented was completely dismantled, protecting countless future training exercises from compromise. And Sergeant Marcus Riley learned that sometimes the most important battles are fought not with weapons and tactics, but with careful observation, sound judgment, and the courage to act when something just doesn't seem right. The morning sun cast long shadows across Fort Mitchell's training grounds as Sergeant Marcus Riley adjusted his combat gear one final time. The air was thick with anticipation and the familiar smell of dust and sweat that always accompanied field exercises. Today was different, though. Today, the 3rd Infantry Division was conducting their most intensive combat simulation of the year, and everyone knew careers could be made or broken based on performance. Marcus had been in the Army for 8 years, working his way up from a green recruit to a respected non-commissioned officer. His record was spotless, his leadership skills recognized by superiors, and his men trusted him completely. At 29, he had his sights set on making Staff Sergeant within the next promotion cycle. This exercise was his chance to prove he deserved it. The training scenario was complex, a simulated urban warfare situation where 2 companies would face off in a mock city built specifically for such exercises. Buildings made of plywood and concrete blocks created realistic street layouts, complete with windows, doorways, and rooftops that provided strategic advantage points. The objective was simple in theory, but challenging in execution: capture and hold key positions while eliminating enemy forces. Marcus gathered his squad of 12 soldiers around him as other units prepared nearby. The sounds of equipment being checked, radios crackling with communications, and boots on gravel filled the air. His squad was tight-knit, having trained together for months. There was Jenkins, the veteran marksman who could hit a target from incredible distances; Rodriguez, the communications specialist who never let them down; and Thompson, the explosives expert who could breach any barrier. As Marcus briefed his team on their assigned sector, he noticed movement in his peripheral vision. A figure in combat fatigues was walking purposefully across the compound, heading toward the command post. Something about the person's stride and posture caught his attention, but before he could focus on it properly, his radio crackled to life. All units, this is Control. Exercise begins in 15 minutes. Repeat, 15 minutes to commencement. Ensure all safety protocols are in place, and weapons are loaded with simulation rounds only. The announcement snapped Marcus back to the task at hand. He ran through the final equipment check with his squad, ensuring everyone had their protective gear properly secured and their weapons loaded with the special training ammunition designed to mark hits without causing serious injury. The simulation rounds were high-tech devices that would register impacts and send signals to a central computer system that tracked the exercise in real time. Listen up, Marcus called to his squad. We've trained for this scenario dozens of times. Stick to the plan, watch each other's backs, and remember your training. Alpha Team takes the left flank, Bravo Team goes right, and Charlie Team holds the center. I'll coordinate from the command position once we establish our foothold. The soldiers nodded, their faces showing the mix of excitement and nervous energy that always preceded major exercises. This wasn't their first rodeo, but the stakes felt higher somehow. Word had come down from battalion headquarters that several high-ranking officers would be observing, evaluating unit readiness, and individual performance for upcoming deployment rotations. As the countdown continued, Marcus checked his own gear one more time. His rifle was clean and properly zeroed, his radio was functioning perfectly, and his body armor was secure. He had done this routine hundreds of times, but he never took shortcuts when it came to safety and preparation. In the Army, attention to detail wasn't just about following regulations. It was about staying alive and keeping your people safe. The mock city stretched out before them, a maze of buildings and obstacles that would test every skill they had learned in training. Marcus studied the layout one final time, visualizing the routes his teams would take and identifying potential choke points and ambush sites. The enemy force, comprised of soldiers from another company, would be equally well-prepared and motivated. This wasn't going to be easy. 5 minutes to commencement, came the voice over the radio. Marcus felt his heart rate increase slightly, a natural response to impending action that he had learned to channel into focus and alertness. Around him, his squad members were making their own final preparations, checking weapons, adjusting equipment, and reviewing their assigned routes one last time. The observation tower stood tall above the training area, and Marcus could see figures moving around up there. Officers with binoculars and notepads evaluating every move that would be made in the coming hours. He knew that careers could be advanced or stalled based on performance in exercises like this, and he was determined to lead his squad to success. 2 minutes, announced the radio. Marcus gathered his squad leaders for a final word. Remember, this is about teamwork and communication. Individual heroics might look impressive, but they usually get people killed in real combat. We move together, we watch out for each other, and we accomplish the mission as a unit. The 3 team leaders nodded their understanding. Jenkins, Rodriguez, and Thompson had all been with Marcus for over a year, and they had developed an almost telepathic understanding of each other's methods and capabilities. This cohesion would be their greatest asset in the complex urban environment they were about to enter. 30 seconds to commencement. All units prepare to execute. Marcus keyed his radio. Alpha Squad ready for action. Similar confirmations came from the other squad leaders across both companies. The tension was palpable as over 60 soldiers prepared to engage in what would be several hours of intense, simulated combat. Exercise commences now. All units are clear hot. The words had barely finished crackling through the radio when Marcus gave the hand signal to his teams. Like a well-oiled machine, his squad moved forward in practice formations, each team taking their assigned route toward their objectives in the mock city. The game was on, and Marcus felt the familiar rush of adrenaline that came with leading soldiers into action, even simulated action. Little did he know that this exercise would become the most significant event of his military career, setting in motion a chain of events that would test not just his tactical skills, but his character, his loyalty, and ultimately his future in the Army he had dedicated his life to serving.